Perfect timing. The big, beautiful bill. Honestly, some of this is a little bit too much for me, folks. It's a little bit too much. The theater, everything, the predictability of it all. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. The numbers that matter today are the numbers in the House for the big, beautiful bill. As it was making its way through the Senate, I couldn't help but to laugh at some of the inconsistencies. Politicians are creeps. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Hypocrisy is more than a little common, right? So I got this clip that I think says it all from Lisa Murkowski, and I thought we'd just have a little bit of fun today picking apart this stuff. All of a sudden, Democrats care now about reconciliation and the debt. This is a party, and at least I can honestly say I remained intellectually honest myself. The CARES Act that was passed at the end of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, which basically gave a bunch of it just flushed the healthcare sector and unions and tons of other people, lobbyists on K Street. It's like the biggest achievement ever in the history of lobbying. Pfizer hired the most lobbyists out of any singular interest, big corporate interest during that period. And it paid off, right? And people were scared. And we printed money for a bill that was the largest spending bill we have ever done in the history of our country. Over $4 trillion, giving schools supposedly the money that it would take to reopen during COVID, yada, yada, yada. It was a bad bill. It was a horrible bill. It was the worst bill of the Trump administration, and it was a disgrace, honestly, to Republican presidents. But Joe Biden gets in office and then basically doubles up on the bill. Only he passes another one, almost same amount, and it's completely unnecessary. It's not needed at all. At least Trump was in a bad position where he had to say, look, I want to get the schools reopened. Fine. You need the money. Fine. And Trump didn't like the bill, but look, it was just, if you weren't there and you don't remember, then it's hard to explain the politics of that time. And I wish Donald Trump would have resisted those politics at the time, which Barnes and I were one of two people to tell him to do in the entire known universe. Everyone else, including my good friend Steve, was, we got to do it. We got to do it. We got to do it. And the reason why is not because Steve didn't think it was a scam. It's because, they trotted in, the Imperial College, which got it all kicked off. They trotted in Mike Pence and his team and Deborah Birx and Fauci. They trotted in the Imperial College study, and they said, Mr. President, if you don't do this, which started the ball rolling in this direction, if you don't do this, this is how many people will die. And oh, by the way, these are your voters. These are older people, and all the way down the line, guys, to like the unhealthy and obese people in Appalachia. I kid you not. And then he did it and pulled the trigger. Within weeks, he knew he had made a mistake, but that was the politics, and it snowballed from there. So at least there's some explainable reason for why Donald Trump would pass such an abomination of a bill, or sign. The Congress passed it, obviously, but that Trump would sign such an abomination. On the other side of it, here you go, little buddy. Democrats get in office after, with Joe Biden promising that he will shut down the virus. Here you go. I opened it for you. Yeah, we'll shut down the virus, not do it on the table, two hands. You know the drill, right? We'll shut down the virus, not the economy. And he comes in and he does a mirrored package of the CARES Act, almost equal in size, which was unbelievable amounts of money. Folks, we're talking about $4 trillion. I mean, that's an insane amount of money. George Bush spent that much on 2 wars. It's an insane amount of money. And that bill, however, was like kickbacks to unions and Green New Deal scams and all sorts of nonsense. That was totally unnecessary, right? And the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Slapping a cool name on something doesn't make it what it is. And it ended up spiking the cost of living. And here we are now, right? Through all of this, after Barack Obama passed Obamacare, Nobody cared about reconciliation. Nobody cared about the debt. They just steamrolled forward. They just pushed it on through. One crisis, one brinksmanship bill to the next. That's how we've been governing in this country. And now all of a sudden you have people like Chuck Schumer giving two shits about reconciliation. I mean, it's not even serious. It's not even serious. And that's ultimately the problem we have in this country. We're not serious anymore. We're not serious people. No wonder why, honestly, somebody like Donald Trump has appealed to tens and tens of millions of people. What did you expect? You're all a bunch of freaking, you're jokes. You're all a bunch of losers. Here comes this serious guy who you don't think is serious, but somehow has his name in gold all over the world. And you're wondering why people have an appeal for it. It's just, I mean, it's just insane. And then to watch it over and over again. Anyway, Rand Paul, these libertarians. Look, Rand is a nice guy. By the way, so is, well, I don't know if I'd say he's a nice guy, but Massey's like an okay personal dude, But these are grandstanders. Where were they? Thomas Massey actually helped Democrats in the Biden administration get through bills that the party hated, didn't care about debt at all. I mean, it just comes out of nowhere. And by the way, I just got to tell you that the poll with Thomas Massey is a joke. All right, the idea you're going to beat Thomas Massey is a clown show. It just is. Massey's not going down. All right, this has happened before. By the way, he's been through this before, including with a Trump-aligned candidate, and the Trump-aligned candidate got destroyed. But it does have libertarian roots, and Kentucky, you have to understand the history of the state. It's ripe for that. And then on one hand, you have the reason why Trump does so much better in Kentucky than other Republicans is because of that old, even coal mining, ancestral Democratic class. Think of the old 5th congressional district. Perfect example. Republicans almost lost it in 2018, by the way. They came this close, almost lost it. And Trump could just walk away with a district like that, 20 points, no problem. And I mean, these guys come out and they make a big stink and they huff and puff when they feel like it's safe that they can. Right? That's what it comes down to. They always put on these shows when it's safe to put on these shows. Anyway, so Rand Paul's against this, and the Congressional Budget Office, by the way, which always comes out. Let me just say this before I bring up this clip because I want to play this clip. The Congressional Budget Office came out, and the amount of Republicans that cited it is disgusting. The Congressional Budget Office, known as the CBO, scores legislation and the impact that legislation is going to have on the debt and deficits. It is a total con. This Congressional Budget Office was instituted during the Great Society era to help perpetuate government bureaucracy and the social programs that were implemented. It's to scare you to put out these scorings, which is done through a method called static scoring. It is to scare you into never reforming, never going back, never removing bureaucracy, never removing, ridiculous spending levels because, this many people will be thrown into the streets and this many people will lose their health care. And, oh, by the way, debt and deficits will go here if you have a tax cut for the love of God, for God forbid. And during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is part of the big, beautiful bill, during the initial passage and the debating of its passage, of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which, by the way, Republicans needed a much larger majority to get done. Think about that. And they failed to repeal Obamacare. Think about that. Much larger majority than they currently have right now. But in any event, They scored the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and they said that it would add $10 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years, which was an insane amount of money, like just crazy. They do not do something called dynamic scoring. Dynamic scoring is what Dan Mitchell and myself and many others argued back then on People's Pundit Daily, that this is not really true because, and let me see, CGA. Let me see if I can actually pull, oops, that's not right. Let me see if I can actually pull up that. I wasn't expecting to go this much into detail, but I think maybe it is worth it. Just for posterity, to show you not, I mean, you take my word for it, of course, but they came out and said this because they static scored and not dynamic scoring, which also accounts for increased revenues to the Treasury, for instance. Economic activity, right? An increase in economic activity, which of course does what, guys? Results in increased revenues to the Treasury. So they do this on purpose. It's a well-known criticism of the CBO and has been going on for many, 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 many years. When they did that, they later had to issue, about a year later, had to issue an amendment to their initial projection that basically said in footnotes, we were wrong. As it turns out, all the people like Dan Mitchell and myself were right. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduced the corporate tax rate. There's a Goldilocks zone. It ranges between a little over 10, 15 is more solid, to just about 25%. Our corporate tax rate was about 35%. There's a Goldilocks zone where if you lower the corporate tax rate too much, then you're not going to be, even if you increase activity, you're still not going to be increasing revenues enough to be able to offset the lost revenue from taxes being lowered. Also, part of that Goldilocks zone is why Trump became the first president since the Great Recession to get job and wage growth where it was. Obama wanted us to believe that 2% GDP and even less wage growth was the new normal, but it wasn't. Increased revenues in the Goldilocks zone, in addition to increased wages for workers. Workers' wages rise the lower you have a corporate tax rate. It's like 50 now. It was 50 when we were debating it. So now almost 60 years of data from the developing world, from not exactly right-wing sources, the OECD, which is Paris-based, the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Almost 60 years now, 57 years of data from developed nations shows that there is a Goldilocks zone. You go above 25, you're going to start to hurt economic activity, which will decrease revenues. Not to mention, it hurts economic activity. But if you go too low, and some argue it's below 10, Dan and I both did this back then, and it's really around 13%. But if you go below that, it's too much. That's if you structure it like a progressive income tax is structured. Now, there's a better form of taxation. There's better forms and flat taxes, right? And consumption taxes. Our founders did not believe in taxing productivity. They believed in taxing consumption. Why? Because they had the Protestant ethic. You tax excess. You tax consumption. You do not tax production because, what does the Protestant ethic believe? God wants you to work. He wants you to produce. He wants you to use your talents to make the world a better place. Wealth, for pursuing wealth for the sake of wealth is bad, but not just the pursuit of wealth itself. There's something different than the Protestant form of capitalism than just the pursuit of greed. Anyway, I'm taking a bit of a detour here, but the bottom line is Republicans listening to the CBO is a joke. What wound up happening? They had to amend their projection because, of course, they were wrong. Revenues rose, so did wages beyond 3%. And by the way, they stayed that way until COVID. Consecutive monthly wage growth of over 3%. It was beautiful. And they had to destroy it. And now Republicans listening to the CBO while at the same time, somebody like Rand Paul just drives me nuts, while at the same time complaining about social spending, social programs, spending on social care, Medicaid, Social Security. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was, and I was going to use say a name. I didn't do it. I was going to name call. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act actually was the only thing helping to offset deficit spending from those three programs, including another area of spending you can't stand, Senator: defense. But he wanted to sink the bill. It's just, now Massey is claiming, the House version of Rand Paul is claiming that he has enough votes to kill the big beautiful bill in the House. If Trump doesn't get this, it will be a major failure, whether you like the bill or not. Here's something the Libertarians do not want to acknowledge. That includes everyone from Elon Musk to Rand Paul to Thomas Massey. They don't care about illegal immigration. They don't care that our legal migration and immigration laws need to be reformed. They don't care about any of that. Libertarianism doesn't care about immigration at all. The money that's going to be saved by the U.S. taxpayer, or for the U.S. taxpayer, because we're no longer spending $260 billion annually on paying for other people's kids and people who don't respect our laws. Healthcare, by the way, they were not supposed to be getting. Are you old enough to remember when Democrats said that illegals don't get healthcare? What are you talking about? Illegal immigrants don't get Medicaid. This is a non-issue. And then every CBO-aligned scumbag at the Brookings Institute, by the way, the CBO is deeply corrupt. That's another thing. They, along with the fellows at the Brookings Institute, were at the Obama White House trying to figure out how to actively lie to you about Obamacare being a tax and how to get it around the Supreme Court when it ended up there. It's not a tax, it's a penalty. And even back then, during that debate, illegals weren't supposed to be getting it. Yet here, the big beautiful bill comes along, and all of a sudden, it's now common knowledge, and we're supposed to feel bad about it, that people who are here illegally will not get Medicaid. It's just, again, all of this is just so unserious. Anyway, Rand Paul basically said that Lisa Murkowski sold out. You know I cannot stand Lisa Murkowski. I don't like her. She's not a nice person. She's not a nice woman. She's a political opportunist at its worst and a grade A piece of shit. However, I'm going to use this clip because I think it shows how unserious both sides of this debate are. I mean, Lisa is a bought and paid for scumbag, right? And she's acting as if there's some principled reason she stood up to Rand Paul. I don't know if you guys have seen this clip yet. You probably haven't, but it's just hilarious. It's Ryan Nobles, all right? And he approaches Lisa Murkowski with comments yesterday that Rand Paul had said, all right? Here we go. Let's play this clip. Watch her face, by the way. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to like stop myself in the middle of this, but from interrupting. But this is a woman who, again, knows she cannot win an election in her state fairly. All right. And that she is no longer. Oh, also, it's a woman we all know is going to be a Democrat soon. She's going to pretend that she's an independent. She's going to leave the Republican Party. I don't know if you all know this, but I don't know why Fox News isn't telling everybody every time she's mentioned on Fox News. Chad Pergram, that guy is a piece of himself. Tell people when you run the headlines that Republicans have concerns about this and this Republican has concerns about it. She's not a Republican. She hasn't been since Joe Miller beat her because Joe Miller beat her in the primary because she was not a Republican. Karl Rove and her team parachuted in to convince Democrats to not vote for their candidate and instead to write in Lisa Murkowski. And God knows what they did for those Never mind. A certain indigenous population that couldn't even spell Murkowski. God knows. But in any event, now she rigged. This is a woman who rigged the primary because she knows she can't beat a Kelly Chewbacca or a Joe Miller. So that she threw her state to the Democratic Party, even though the Democratic Party is against its number one product and export, what makes the Alaskan economy go around, oil. But because she's more important than the people of her state, she has compromised her state. She has ruined the integrity of elections in her state just so she can stay in office. And she claims she has nothing to do with it. It was her chief of staff and all of her legislative aides. Once they were done with it, they came right back to DC and took their old jobs back. Now she's going to leave because she's got ranked choice voting. She's going to claim to be an independent and she's going to caucus with Democrats. Hey, Alaska, you know what? You deserve it, honestly. Thomas Jefferson. The government you elect is the government you deserve. So when you don't have anything but a green new scam economy because you're not allowed to drill in your state anymore, you can blame it on yourself and Lisa Murkowski. All right, let's go.
Out there. Senator Paul said that your vote was a bailout for Alaska at the expense of the rest of the country.
Oh my.
That's what Senator Paul said.
Oh my God, she's so offended. And again, watch how she takes the stand like she loves her state. I have responsibility to my state. Again, everything I just told you, it's just a joke. It's so laughable. Look at the long pause. Look at this. Watch this. It's so uncomfortable. Awkward. What the hell is this?
I didn't say it, ma'am. I'm just asking for your
What
response.
is this? What kind of behavior is
My
this?
response is I have an obligation to the people of the state of Alaska. And I live up to that every single day.
Weird,
I
right?
have my state's interests, and I make sure that Alaskans are understood. I work hard to take care of a state that has more unique situations, more unique people,
What the hell is she talking about?
and it's just different. And
Then you're dumb white ass, Rand. You get that? Did you catch that? You're backward Appalachian dumb white ass. You don't know what I have to deal with in my state. I have different people. We have such different people. Get out of here. Florida makes your state look like a unirace state. Are you kidding me? Get out of here with this nonsense. Look at how weird was that pause. Poor Ryan. What do you do when a U.S. senator is just staring at you like that? She was called out, right? She was called out. She didn't know what to do. And instead, she just feigned outrage and offense, right? Like she's offended by his comment. Well, how ludicrous was this? And honestly, I mean, what was that? Is that even a stable person anymore? I mean, there's so many of these people, they've been around for so long, folks. Their health is failing, their minds are failing, their morality failed years ago. But I mean, like the very mental state of mind of these people is in doubt. And like, you know, somebody repealed the 17th Amendment for the love of God. Because by the way, she would never be able to survive in the state of Alaska as a US senator if the Alaskan legislature was responsible for who to send to the U.S. Senate. I will happily give up my vote for U.S. senator to reinstitute the original design. And to what that means is vest power in a more diverse fashion, to separate power. This woman is bought by K Street, hook, line. She is theirs to direct at will. And this is just what you're going to get. We have to tolerate this stuff.
so when people suggest that federal dollars go to one of our 50 states in a quote bailout, I find that offensive.
Offensive. I'm offended.
I advocated for
All I
our
see is
state's
Karen.
interests. I will continue to do that, and I will make no excuses for doing that.
So she represented Alaska's interest when she sent her staffers to the state to rig election laws in a fashion that could help her survive because the voters of her state didn't want her anymore. It's so absurd. I have a responsibility. I don't look at just even the dyed hair and everything. Lisa Murkowski has dark brown hair. Go and look at her when she was young. This woman is the definition of what's killing us in this country. I'm sorry, but it's true. It's these like overeducated Karens. They're doing us dirty. They think they're better than everybody. So in order for her statement to make sense, she needs to think that she, in fact, knows better than the voters of her state what's in the best interest of the state of Alaska. So she needed to rig the system so that their dumb, ignorant people in her state couldn't remove her because she's so good for the state. She knows so much better. They don't even know. They're just too ignorant to understand that they can't afford to lose her. Let me tell you what's really going on. Lisa Murkowski has been there forever. And in Washington, seniority is everything. A junior senator would come in and would not be able to get K Street everything that they wanted because juniors don't direct legislation. They don't decide what gets tabled or what's advanced. They don't have any influence on committees. They're not as high a value to special interests on K Street than senior senators and senior congressmen are. They have more weight behind their word when the whole operation that is a giant quid pro quo in Washington gets set up. I need my bill passed. If our little caucus, my little caucus that I direct, my little caucus, if our caucus supports your bill, how are you going to ensure to me that you guys will support mine? I scratch your back, you scratch mine. That's how DC works. A junior senator can't deliver that. A junior senator can't promise that, but a senior one can. And a senior one can also do something else better, and not even better. They can do it while others can't. They can make sure that favored legislation that was passed in prior legislative sessions, that special interest paid for, by the way, all the lobbyists, all the campaign contributions, all the advertisements, they can make sure that all of that money that was spent on those prior legislative accomplishments don't go down the drain. When a junior senator from Alaska comes in and decides, I don't think we really need this bill anymore, I'm going to vote no. Only more senior members can control whether or not that happens. So to special interests, she's worth more. To the state of Alaska, is she? Well, of course, the answer is no. She has now insulated herself to the point where when her own voters don't want her, they can rank choice her in again. It's all right. We don't need a plurality or a majority on the first round. We just need to survive the first round. And we need to paint the other guy or girl as a total nutcase. And in fact, this backfires. That's how Mary Peltola became the congresswoman for the at-large district in Alaska. You had Mark Begich and you had Sarah Palin fighting it out, and they were fighting for Republican votes. The state, obviously, is 60% Republican, but they couldn't get through on the first round. So Mary Peltola won when you combine the votes twice. Not once, but twice. And of course, it took who? Donald Trump and a consolidated candidate to undo that. For U.S. Senate, you're talking about a lot more money. A lot more money. All right, let's finish out the clip. We'll move on because I do have another one, which I think is worth talking about. Something happened yesterday that did not get enough attention. It's a 16-second clip, but it says it all.
Do I like this bill? No. because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we moved through an artificial deadline,
But
an artificial timeline to produce something, to meet a deadline, rather than to actually try to produce the best bill for the country.
But I need the 20% on the next round of ranked choice voting. So anyway, you see how this works? I need 20% anyway on that next round, and I can't afford to be hammered over this bill. So I did it anyway. So I'm going to pretend like I'm just good for both sides. I'm outraged that Rand Paul would say something like that about me. I'm offended. I'm offended. Look at me with my blonde Karen hair. I'm offended. But on the same token, I don't want to draw the ire of the president and some of his other supporters. So I'm going to do this, make sure he doesn't come at me with a campaign, with a challenge later. And I can sneak by on the second or third round. It's smart. It's dirty. It's disingenuous. It's dishonest. It lacks principle. It lacks character. And worst of all, it lacks the ability to appreciate the gravity of the moment that we're in the country, because people that are as unserious as this will never solve the problems that we have. And it will be a slower decline, but nevertheless a decline. Until people like this are gone, I don't know how on earth you could solve the problems that we have. And I'm not picking on Republicans here or Senate Republicans. It's across the board. Democrats, they know what they want. They go after it. Republicans are too busy trying to figure out how to be popular in DC and with the Washington Post and make sure they don't end up in Politico Playbook with a negative, the kickoff of a negative story or something. But Democrats don't have any of that to worry about. But they'll never care about deficits beyond this debate. They'll never care about debt beyond this debate. They'll never care about financial solvency in general beyond this debate. It's just grandstanding. They care about the deficits, yet they have no problem with all of this garbage just flowing to USAID. And of course, that's not at all the driver of debt and deficits. The big social programs are, as is defense spending, and a lack of an ability to grow at a rate that at least gives us a chance to, reform. And by reform, I mean cut and plus grow our way out of it. For people ask me my personal opinion about this all the time, and I always tell them that I actually think that it's almost a certainty that our last chance to grow our way out of this was gone the minute they released a deadly virus on the world to defeat Donald Trump for re-election, because that's when the housing sector was coming back online to be the fourth and final cylinder firing all at once in the U.S. economy, and getting to the point where not only wage growth would approach like a real 4 and more, because some of the 4% we saw was just data distortion since COVID in the labor market. And it's not real. And unfortunately, it's not benefiting us as if it was real. Plus, with inflation during the Biden era, it ate away all of those gains. So it was pointless. On net, it was pointless. Well, not pointless, because at least it helped offset the cost of living increase, right? But it's not going to get us to the goal, which is to get our financial house in order. And the economy with home builder construction and pending home sales and existing home sales and new residential construction, all of that coming back, builder sentiment at an all-time high. That was our moment. I think that's my own personal opinion. Maybe I pray to God I'm wrong, but the amount that's been added on since then is even worse. Because of that, I mean, think about the situation that we were in when Trump was turning around the economy back in 18 and 19, when we were starting to finally see the fruits of his economic reforms. I mean, in great, to a point where it was extreme and everybody could appreciate it. And by the way, there used to be a tracker on PPD where you could see total national debt, and it was actually declining for a kick there, or at least projections that it would. And then that happened, and then we got the CARES Act, another $5 trillion. Bam, Joe Biden and the Inflation Reduction Act. Bam, so it's $9 trillion right there. So I pray I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not a Chicken Little, but I'm also a realist.
The direction that this is going. You can either say, I don't like it, not try to help my state, or you can roll up your sleeves.
Oh, she rolled up her sleeves, folks. That's what she did. So she didn't like it. I mean, look, take one side or take the other. It's we're going to make sure we do this right and get it done. But again, all of this is the reason Rand Paul has the up on her, even though I don't personally agree with him. Oops, wrong clip. Clip's going already. Can we stop that? The reason Rand Paul has the one up on her here is because he's being intellectually consistent, at least on that. The problem that she has is that she never cared, guys, about all the other times where she could have had the same objections. She didn't care. When it was a Democratic bill, when it was green new scams and kickbacks to unions, she didn't care. She didn't have all of these objections about procedure and regular order and deficit spending. Come on. Give me a break. It's the same thing with the nominations. Joe Biden nominated a man for the position of Secretary of Defense who did not believe in civilian control over the U.S. military. It probably is the one viewpoint that you can hold that will disqualify you for that position. In our country, our founders, it was it. The Quartering Act was it for many of them. You cannot have a standing army. Standing armies are not good for liberty. That sent them over the edge. And you must have civilian control over that power. They'd be horrified. The man in charge of the biggest bureaucracy in the world, the most powerful bureaucracy in the world, and the most powerful military in the world doesn't believe that the sovereign voter should control it. She said nothing. Nothing. She had no objections. So it's just, so on this, even though I don't agree with Rand Paul, at least he can put his head on his pillow at night, right? And be honest. I mean, she does anyway. Plus, I hear Valium helps. Let's take a break. All right, guys, let's talk about our friends at 1775 Coffee. What if your coffee, and which I need, didn't wake you up, but actually made you feel sharp, focused, and ready for the day? That's the difference with 1775's Peaberry Coffee. These beans are rare, less than 5% of all coffee grown. They're denser, naturally higher in caffeine, and packed with antioxidants. That means more mental clarity, better energy, and zero crash. Each bean grows solo, high in the Bolivian mountains, and it is hand-picked at peak ripeness. The result? It's a smoother, more concentrated flavor that kickstarts your metabolism without the acidity or the jitters that comes with so many of the other coffee companies. You're still getting 1775's organic, small batch, small farm, small single origin quality, just with a bean that goes above and beyond. Go to 1775coffee.com, use the promo code TPP. You can slap that code on the end of it, by the way, or you could just go to 1775coffee.com. Link is in the description and get 15% off. Go check out, there's the starter kits, of course, but go check out the Peabody blend as well. You're going to love it. It's coffee that actually earns its place in the morning. Peabody's dope. It's good. It is really good. I like them all, frankly. I like everything this company has, everything. But the Peabody, if you have not tried it and you got the starter kit, yeah, definitely knock yourself out. TPP is the code, get 15% off. All right. Man, it just, those starter kits too are just so, they're awesome. All right. Where is he? So All right. This kind of fell by the wayside. And with Elon Musk fighting with Donald Trump, people aren't really paying that much attention to it. I think Doge was a good effort. I do. It's just that when you're talking about where the money really lies, okay, it's in defense contracts, it's in defense spending, it's in Social Security, it's in Medicare, and it's in Medicaid. Even if there was to become some political appetite to reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, you would still really need to tackle defense. You would. And the defense budget, I would argue, is probably more of a threat to freedom than Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, you could make the arguments both ways. One, and I imagine the purest, limited small government mind would say that no, it is the social safety net because it strips people of the integrity of work. It ruins the work ethic, which, by the way, is against the very nature of our identity. It makes people lazy. It makes them want a handout instead of a hand up, right? And that is all very, very true. But the intelligence state is the real physical threat to you and liberty. The defense budget is the secretive budget, right? By the way, there's a huge healthcare fraud bust in case you didn't see it. I don't know why all this only happens under Donald Trump. Nobody goes after Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security fraud under Democratic presidents. Like, why? Like, they just let it roll. Apparently. But Doge focused on USAID and scam payments with the IRS and everything else, people getting tax returns that didn't belong it, right? I mean, they're like very good efforts, but kind of chiseling around the edges. However, USAID is more than just chiseling around the edges, even though it isn't it isn't as much money as other items in the defense budget, right? However, it does structure the national security state in a certain way, all right? And I don't know if we did end up getting it, but all right. So the way that it is set up now, which is like we have talked about this a lot on the show, about what is essentially a grift, all right? What is essentially a money laundering operation, right? And we have talked about this a lot in the past. We're sending money through taxpayer funds to groups that advance these agendas. And oh, by the way, USAID is actually trending on Twitter right now. So I guess we were about an hour ahead of the curve here. But there it is. It's happening right now. So they're actually yesterday it was announced that Rubio the State Department seized USAID. And that's important because if it is shut down in the way that it is currently put together, then there's, for instance, Ukraine, right? All of these NGOs that get involved. You have a politician like the Biden family who can direct U.S. policy, but then they also have friends in Congress. And at one time, of course, he was himself in Congress. And they can also direct money to these groups that are going to then spend that money on things that are going to make certain people rich, right? There's also the entire, I don't want to say like coup ready apparatus that goes into USAID, right? And of course, all of the national security agencies that use it as a way to I had a little, I don't know if you can find it, that'd be great. Oh, there it is. You did that's like 2 minutes. It's like 1 minute and 46 seconds. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to show you should watch the whole hour and a half. I'm not going to, but we're going to show you a minute and 26 seconds, which is basically, Mike doing a pitch for his show. But he does do a good job explaining why this does deal if the State Department, if the Trump administration carried through with this, it would deal a significant blow to the national security state, because this is their personal slush fund, right? And no one's done anything, including Republicans. Nobody has done anything about it. And it's a way to get around elected officials and implementing and like the public policies that we as Americans vote for or don't vote for. All of this bureaucracy, and their NGOs, right? All of them are operating behind the scenes and independent of the agenda that you voted for. It doesn't matter if you voted for Barack Obama because you didn't like the Iraq War, you didn't like the Afghanistan war. They and certainly didn't want to see something like that in Syria, for instance. They were still going to be able to, to carry on with their mission without Barack Obama being a problem. By the way, Barack Obama was never going to be a problem. Barack Obama, of course, was totally full of shit, right? He did wind down the war in Iraq, and I think that's fair to give him credit for. However, it's also fair to blame him for how he did that. And because he did it the way he did, it led to ISIS taking over a government that was not yet stable and territory, huge swaths of territory all throughout the Middle East that would later then be used. I mean, it's just a never-ending cycle, which is where you wonder why so many people don't want anything to do with the Middle East at all. It's a never-ending cycle, because that led then to a pretext to go after Assad. And as if Assad wasn't trying at one point to fight ISIS with Russia. They were. And by the way, Trump came in his first administration and destroyed ISIS with the cooperation of Russia, despite being goaded into launching airstrikes against Assad for a chemical attack he appears to have not waged. All right. Anyway, this is Mike Benz, smart guy. Listen to this clip, and then I did have one Schumer that I wanted to kick off, because it basically, when you listen to Schumer, you're like, man, obviously he would not be this distraught if what Mike is saying wasn't the case.
Point in the way that American statecraft and intelligence works. This is one of these moments, like the 1947 National Security Act that created the Central Intelligence Agency, like the reorganizations of the intelligence community in the 1970s and early 1980s. 2025 will be remembered for generations after us for setting in motion a reorganization of the way American soft power, intelligence operations, and statecraft works. I will be doing a public live stream tonight as a lecture completing the heritage lecture that has been the pinned
and you should look
video.
We're not going to do it
for
here.
The past year or so on my X feed. The video at about 10 million views. Folks who watched that may remember that lecture was cut off as I was going through the history of the intelligence state in about the 1980s. Yep. I will be going through the rest of that lecture, as well as the update for 2025 and the implications for how American intelligence and statecraft and soft power will work after the historic reorganization of USAID being absorbed by the State Department, effective today.
Also a big
they've
been
doing
my bad. All right. Also, what is a big deal about this, which if you do watch this, it's later, don't do it now. But if you do watch it, what I want you to pay attention to is this. And for those of you in book club, maybe you know some of this, but over the years, especially with the National Security Act in 47, diplomacy has steadily lost power, lost ground to one-time War Department, now the Defense Department, right? They used to be more influential over foreign policy, and the Defense Department which was just really supposed to be about military power, became more involved in statecraft and diplomacy, and then had, by the way, more influence in the White House, regardless of who was in the White House. A lot of people who study this, like once upon a time I did, when we talk about this in book club a lot, we read several pretty important books to this. The Bush administration, W. Bush, was like the turning point for when it was realized that the State Department has completely lost control. Colin Powell is about as strong of as a figure, they believed at the time, that you could put at the helm of the State Department so that they're not bulldozed by the Pentagon and programs like this, right? So obviously, we know the history. Rumsfeld got his way. Rumsfeld got his conventional wars in areas, by the way, that are totally irrelevant to what happened on 9/11. And since that time, the State Department's been effectively neutered. Everyone thought Hillary Clinton was a somewhat strong figure, but all she did was clock mileage, folks. She was doing a 4-year-long tour to run for president. That's all she was doing until John Kerry took over. She wasn't clawing back power from the Pentagon. Gaddafi, for instance, something she was responsible for. Those were like little side projects by then. It had already been, areas, organizations and the NGOs that are attached to them, like USAID, had already implemented that, and the State Department kind of get like the crumbs of what was left over to be able to manage it. But they weren't in control of foreign policy. And when a war kicks off, they lose even more control. All right. So this is why this is that significant. It's not just that it'll make it more difficult for those intelligence services and to be able to do their coups, right? To be able to exert influence around the world, because that's more. Yes, intelligence services use soft power, yes, but the State Department was always much more about soft power. And the Pentagon, of course, was hard power. And now this has been shifted. So soft power is supposed to be used, hopefully, for the purpose of not having to use hard power. But it was being abused. They were using soft power in an effort to get us in positions where we would have to use hard power. All right, so it is a big deal. It is a big deal. The question is whether or not it'll last. The question is, what will Rubio do with it? And of course, the question is, what will next president do with it? Right. All right. Where is it? It's like I said, it's like 20 seconds. It's not even that much, but it doesn't matter. We don't have to play it. It's all right. It's not there. 20 seconds of Schumer having a complete and total meltdown, which is just, and he's composed. So I don't mean a meltdown like that, but all of this stuff going on. And that is what he is concerned about. Why? Here we go again. After the Supreme Court does what they do. Yeah, I have to read this. This is important. I'm going to redirect here because a federal judge already violated the spirit of the high court's very recent last week's ruling. That basically said these lower courts need to stop these national injunctions when it comes to asylum seekers, right? Illegal immigrants, that they have ruled on this now ad nauseum. And the court, if you read the opinion, you'll see the majority opinion is over the constant stuffing of the court schedule with lower court injunctions that they know they don't have the authority to issue. All right. And now we already have one that did it. All right. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I'll read you what it says. But the judge ruled that Trump's crackdown for those crossing the southern border exceeded his legal authority and must be halted. I mean, this is just insane. This is ridiculous. These courts, this is why when I say just ignore the court, just ignore them, because there's nothing, these guys don't care. And it's Refugee and the Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services versus Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security. And the judge who ruled in this case, and I know I'm going to go over doing this, but I think is Randolph Moss, district court in which district again? Shocker! The District of Columbia, which I should have recognized that. All right, for the reasons that follow, the court concludes that neither the INA nor the Constitution grants the president or the agency defendants authority to replace the comprehensive rules and procedures set forth in the INA and the governing regulations with the extra statutory, extra regulatory regime for repatriating or removing individuals from the United States without an opportunity to apply for asylum or withholding of removal and without complying with the regulations governing CAT protections. The court recognizes that the executive branch faces enormous challenges in preventing and deterring unlawful entry into the U.S. and adjudicating the overwhelming backlog of asylum claims of those who have entered the country. But the INA, by its terms, provides a sole and exclusive means for removing people already present in the country and, as the Department of Justice correctly concluded less than 9 months ago, provides the president with the unilateral authority to limit the rights of aliens present in the United States to apply for asylum. Okay. Here's the problem with this. And he's going Federalist number 25. And he quotes Federalist as the farmers understood every breach of the fundamental laws, even when dictated by necessity, undermines the respect for the rule of law and forms a precedent for other breaches where the same plea of necessity does not exist at all or is less urgent or palpable. Except when, God, somebody remain in Mexico? Of course, they're not here already. But I am thinking of Gorsuch already dealing with this, actually during the first Trump administration, and saying that the authority to limit who can apply and who cannot is squarely within the scope of presidential authority, unless I'm misquoting him. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he said to that. So we'll see. But the court's case last week had to deal with nationwide injunctions, and here we go. We just issued one. I mean, this is just and for you guys wondering, I mean, I don't know if this is shared by other people, but I am being told because I already have a comment from somebody that they will ignore this. So you should. If you're the Trump administration, you should absolutely ignore it. You should ignore every nationwide injunction issued for dealing with the issue of immigration. You should just flat out ignore it and just roll on, because they're never going to stop doing this. And this is a real problem. And I don't know why the administration does not argue this more. This is a direct insult to you, right? And they just don't care what you voted for. They're going to use whatever power they already have to be able to undermine the agenda that people voted for. And we just can't. You can't have that in the country. And by the way, for people who are right-wing listening, when a left-wing president is elected and they do the same thing, as long as it's enforcing of the law, you have to eat it. Because you have to understand that the country voted for that person. That's the agenda they wanted. And you block within the law, but this is not within the law to continuously do this. You can't keep the court has now said as much as they can say. At some point, you have to just operate under the assumption that nothing they ever say, or no matter what ruling they ever hand down, is going to be respected or acknowledged as the law of the land. They're just going to roll over it. So it is what it is. It's 3:05. I hope you guys have better weather where you are than I do where I have. It's awful. Just awful. But it is what it is. By the way, I have one person. How did you read that behind the microphone? Was I like moving around and you were able to figure out what it said? Backward? That's crazy. Yeah, it's a funny shirt. Laura and I have matching shirts like this. Hers is slightly lighter green than mine, but they both say the same thing. Now I have to tell everybody what it says, right? I will put you in the trunk and help people look for you. Don't test me. Get it? I will put you in the trunk and help people look for you. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We saw that and we were like, oh yeah, absolutely. Those are common. All right, so it's 3:06. Don't forget, public polling project link is in the description below. What else? I mean, I make a prediction here. The problem, let me say this before we go. The problem I have with, just come out and say you don't support it, because it's always a matter of kicking responsibility or kicking blame to somebody else. And it just gets annoying after a while. I don't know that this bill is going to pass. I think it's going to head down to the House, and the House version that was sent up to the Senate was different, right? So now the Senate is going to do the same thing back and forth. Remember, the House has the power to tax, the Senate has the power to regulate. That is how they justify trying to be the ones that have the last say on the bill sometimes. But often you have a House with a very, very small majority, and it's going to be difficult to get it through it no matter what. You have a Senate with a very small majority, and it's going to be difficult. And you have these back and forths. At some point, once upon a time, we used to have these cross chamber committees that already knew the framework of what each side could be able to get their caucus to support, but we're in such disarray now that we no longer have that. So the last time that was tried, by the way, was the repeal of Obamacare, and it failed. It failed with John McCain getting his dying body onto a plane to come back to DC just to put his thumb down for everybody to see. Could you imagine dying and having a very short amount of time left that you know about and using it to do that? Yeah, that's the level of human beings we're dealing with. All right, I'm going to get my 1775. You should get yours. Jack Masobic tomorrow. Don't miss that. I will put a bunch of, there's a lot coming. I will also have a major two, but one is coming first, announcement, and I can't tell you yet, but I promise you will be the first to hear about it. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow, and you'll know why I've been so busy by then, I think. If not, you'll have to wait for Monday of next week, but I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to get it before then. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Stay good to each other, and as always, and by the way, don't forget, your phone calls do a lot more than you think. So if you want something to go one way or the other, do not forget to make your calls. They listen. Sometimes. But it couldn't. All right. I'm out. As Laura always says. Deuces. Where's the music? There it is. I mean, call the senators and tell them what you want to do. What you want them to do. That's what I mean. Do it. Yeah, 100%. Pure evil and hatred. You're dying. You're dying. And that's, by the way, another scam artist at the border. Only a border hawk when he's got a primary challenge. Another scam. What it is, folks.